International Desk, I'm Lynda Kinkade. Let's get straight to our top stories. Dozens of people killed and wounded in Afghanistan. The suicide bombing, one of the worst this year, and ISIS is taking credit. Plus, a show of military force in Iran, including the unveiling of some new weapons. We're live from Tehran. And later, Star Wars fans unite over the new trailer released at this convention. And the Force has hit the internet.
Live from CNN Center, you're at the International Desk.
Hello and welcome. We begin in Afghanistan, where ISIS is claiming responsibility for a deadly suicide bombing. At least 33 people were killed after a man blew himself up in front of a bank in Jalalabad. More than 100 people were wounded. This looks to be the first major ISIS attack in Afghanistan, a country torn apart by decades of war. Journalist Nathan Hodge from the Wall Street Journal joins us now from Kabul. And Nathan, this was one of the most brutal of several attacks at a bank branch and shrine. 2 other bombs were defused. How significant is this, given it's the first one claimed by ISIS?
Well, there had been some debate about, among analysts and experts, about the extent to which the Islamic State has actually established a foothold in Afghanistan and Pakistan. We did know that there was a fair amount of recruiting and propagandizing that was going on. But with this attack, it does seem to have moved to the operational phase with this rather dramatic attack in Jalalabad, which caused dozens of casualties, attacking people who were waiting in line outside of a bank to collect their payroll, government employees, soldiers, and members of the military.
Taliban claimed responsibility for a similar deadly attack on that same bank branch in Jalalabad a few years ago, but they've denied and also condemned this latest attack. Is it likely that this attack was carried out by disgruntled Taliban fighters who have been recruited by ISIS?
That's an excellent question, because what we've seen recently are former militants, some of them Taliban, who've rebranded themselves as ISIS. For instance, there was a former Taliban commander who was targeted in a drone strike in southwestern Afghanistan in February and was killed. Also, we've seen cases of former Taliban members in Pakistan as well, who've claimed allegiance to the Islamic State. And there's a lot of debate about whether or not this is a way of attracting new streams of funding, a way of recruiting more followers, but also it sets off a confrontation potentially between the Taliban and the Islamic State, because the Taliban traditionally have been the main rivals and the main threat to the Afghan government here. But with this new player on the scene, the Afghan government's been raising the alarm that the Islamic State is now what presents the biggest threat to the region.
And so should the government turn their attention to ISIS? Obviously, they've spent a lot of time focusing their efforts on the Taliban.
Right, and Afghan President Ashraf Ghani recently visited the United States, in part as a plea for continued funding and support for the Afghan government, which depends on international donors to pay for the operations of its government, to pay the salaries of its army and its police. And some skeptical observers have said, well, raising the threat of ISIS right now is a good way to make sure that you keep the attention of policymakers. Yet it's been pretty clear that there has been acknowledgement from ISIS in the Middle East that they do recognize that they have this so-called province of Khorasan, this area which we call this area in Afghanistan and Pakistan, where they do recognize that they have militant followers. So it does set off a potential competition between militant groups.
We would like to continue this conversation, but we have to move on. Nathan Hodge from the Wall Street Journal, thanks so much for joining us today. We really appreciate it.